And in verse 2 he goes on, but he says, I'm not going to leave you disciplined. I'm not going to leave you destroyed. He says, but you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who's to be the ruler in Israel, whose coming is forth is from old, from ancient of days. Now this was probably shocking because Bethlehem was what? A big city or a small city? Bethlehem was a tiny little town about 5 miles southwest of Jerusalem. It was not a town known for anything. It was not a town, because back then, people who were religious and the Pharisees and everybody who went during Jesus' time, especially the Pharisees, they wanted to be in the place where the action was taking place. And Bethlehem was not a place of action. See, growing up in a big city, you end up, I always tell people I grew up in a little town just south of College Station. College Station is a small city. It's about, well, it's not small anymore. I guess you couldn't say it's small, because small would be, what, under 10,000. I don't know what small is anymore. I mean, you could go, there's towns of all different sizes, but Houston was a big town. In fact, you didn't live in Houston, you lived in parts of Houston. You carved out where you went, because you never went through all of Houston. You lived in this area or that area or this area or that area. And probably in the similar Jerusalem, people were always around. Jerusalem was abuzz with things that were happening, and a center of probably, of course, religious activity, if not social activity as well. But here the prophecy of Micah. Micah says, but you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. Clan was about 1,000 people militarily. He said, you're too little. You're of no repute. You're of nothing. And God is going to say, listen, from you shall come forth for me one who's to be the ruler of Israel. In other words, from the smallest of the littlest of the smallest place is going to come forth someone who is mighty and powerful. See, isn't that the way God works? See, we think, with our Madison Avenue techniques, that only the big things and the noticed things are the things that God can use. It's only when you become famous that God can use you. Well, that's not the case at all. God doesn't have you to be famous to be able to use you. God didn't have to have you come from a certain pedigree or a certain line. In fact, we can offer up nothing to God that says, hey, God, I am worthy to be used. In other words, you come to God and say, God, the only thing I can offer you is my weakness. Amen. The only thing I can offer you is my smallness. The only thing I can offer you is my lack of ability, because I don't have that ability without your mercy and grace in my life. And God here is saying to the people of Judah, the people of Israel, listen, there's going to be a day that judgment's going to come, that punishment is going to come for your past actions because you were self-sufficient. You created your own idols. You created your own ways. You did your things your way, not my way. And I can't let it go. The Bible says that He has to punish the guilty. He doesn't let the guilty go unpunished, it says in Exodus. So as we come before a just God has to punish the guilty. Human beings, being weak as they are, have to rely on God's mercy. And the only way we rely on God's mercy is by the coming of Christ. You see, the coming of Christ at Christmas is all important. We tend to be headstrong, self-reliant. I can do it, I can do it. It's like that little story I heard as a child. What is it, the little engine that could? Remember that little story? I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And we're always encouraged to tell people, oh, you can do better, you can do better, you're doing great, you're doing great. But when it comes to spiritual realities, what we have to do is humble ourselves before God and say, God, I can't. And here was a nation that couldn't. Here was a people that couldn't. They had relied on themselves. They relied on everything. And Micah, in some way, is the server of the summons of God to court. And he's bringing Israel into court and saying, listen, this is my judgment against you. And so the first several chapters of Micah is almost, wow, these are the offenses. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And they should be shocked by now. But right in the middle of Micah, there's an evidence of God's faithfulness to His promises that He made with Abraham. His faithfulness to His promises He made with David. His faithfulness to His promises He's always made. That He watches over. And He says to them, listen, here it is. O Bethlehem. Ephrathah. Bethlehem means what? House of bread. House of bread. Ephrathah means fruitfulness. So now the house of bread is going to be fruitful. It is the place where the fruit of spirituality is going to come. But now he says it's going to come from the smallest place. Well, people from Bethlehem probably didn't just have, I don't know if they had t-shirts that said Bethlehem. You know, it wasn't the popular place to have the t-shirts from. Jerusalem would have been better. You know, there are probably better cities to have t-shirts from. But Bethlehem wasn't the great place. But you know what? They realized, and God realized that in order for people to come to a just God, they had to realize their weakness. They had to realize their sin. And there's no way that we overcome our sin by thinking that we can do it, that we have the strength to be good and live religious lives. Religion is the enemy of Christianity many times. Religion, thinking that we are strong in and of ourselves to come to a just God, is the enemy of Christianity. There's a song that we sing a lot of times at Thanksgiving called Give Thanks with a Grateful Heart. Y'all remember that song? And one of the lines in there goes, Give thanks with a grateful heart. It says, give thanks with a grateful heart. I just forgot the line. I just forgot the line. When I'm weak, Lord, give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks. Oh yeah, wait, let the weak say I am strong. There it is. Sorry. I just forgot the whole thing. But we do that. And here is an image of a city, of a place that was weak. But it's strong because it has a ruler coming from it. You see, Micah quotes the Lord directly. He quotes Ephrathah, meaning fruitfulness, and he says, here is Bethlehem, here's a small place, here's the place, and he says, out of you, from you shall come forth for me. Meaning, here is someone's going to come forth for me, for my glory, for my will, to do the thing that I had planned all along to do. See, the incarnation of Christ is not something that God just is now making up in Micah, 700 years or so before the birth of Christ. It's not something He's just making up now, and it was a good idea at that time because of all the things that Israel had done. It was something that He had planned for and He had promised to do, and now He is prophesying that it is going to happen to give them hope. So when you stand before a holy God, you need hope. And He said, you're going to do it. He's going to come in, for from you shall come forth for me. One is to be a fit ruler, someone who is finally fit to rule Israel. Because how many kings have gone by Israel? A lot of kings. A lot of the kings, what were they? They were just simply idolatrous, weren't they? They were self-confident, self-sufficient. So you could put self-whatever. They focused on themselves. They focused on what they could do in their leadership and all of that. And you know what? Something about a leader in a Christian idea is self-effacing. It's something that's saying, you know, I'm going to look out for the people rather than my agendas. See, one of the things about ministry, I think Christ's ministry, He came to rule Israel, but He came to fulfill their greatest desires. The greatest desire that they had was to be right with God. They wanted to know God in some sense of the way, and especially the people who believed in God, who had true saving faith, they're being punished alongside this. And so they're looking to come to God, and it says He's going to be a ruler. He says whose coming forth is from old, from the Ancient of Days. There's a consensus here that this is the Messiah. There's no doubt that people, whether they're Jewish or they look at this passage and they're saying, chapter 5, verse 2 of Micah talks about the Messiah, the ruler in Israel, who's going to come, and his coming forth is from old, from the Ancient of Days. Now your translation, the NIV, may say from everlasting. Some people believe that this is talking about the everlasting character or the everlasting attribute of Christ. Other people believe that this is talking about from the Ancient of Days, meaning that this promise of the Messiah, He has been promised ever since the time that God had fulfilled His plan or spoke about His plan to Abraham. I believe that's the right way to take this. This plan that God had for Abraham, this plan that God had for the nation of Israel, this plan is going to be fulfilled in the Messiah who is coming forth is from old. And these promises are going to be fulfilled in the coming, in the incarnation, this Christmas of the Messiah.